welcome to the GT3 Championship for Tier 7. It's Season 6 as presented by Apex Online Racing. It's time for round 3 at the Hungaroring. But before we get to that, let's have a quick recap of the previous round at Suzuka. Robert Fodor qualified on pole, followed closely by Ivar Kangset, but a number of drivers picked up drive-through penalties as a result of incidents that happened at the first round at Monza. Amongst those was Ivar Kangset. He had a drive-through penalty to serve within the first 3 laps of the race, so despite both him and Robert Fodor moving clear of the field within the first couple of corners, Ivar knew he was going to have to do another recovery drive like he did do at Monza when he also tumbled down the field in the first lap. But this time he's going to have a bigger job, and the Monza round he only dropped down to about 8th. This early on in the race with a drive-through penalty, he's likely to end up right at the back of the field. But Ivar Kangset elected to serve his drive-through penalty after a couple of laps into the race, and we pick him up as he's recovering back onto the track. And unfortunately his entry into the pits was too hot, and after serving the drive-through he immediately picks up a stop-go and 30-second penalty. This will have really promoted Andrei Kuchar right up the standings into 3rd place, but going through 130R, car suddenly snapped on him, went heavy into the wall, and that put Andrei Kuchar out of the race effectively. The amount of damage sustained in that incident meant an instant trip into the pits for lengthy repairs. This incident promoted Cooley into 3rd place, Cooley finishing 4th on the previous round. And as Kuchar came in for those lengthy repairs, Kangset also came in to serve that 30-second stop-go. This effectively putting him way out of the running, definitely no chance of getting into the top of the field. Much further in the race, the leader Fodor pitted on 15 laps. And this released Sarwas to go into the lead, and it was up to Sarwas now to see if he could do an overcut and put in some quick laps before his pit stop. We joined Sarwas just as he's finishing his pit stop and recovering back to the track, and the question will be where Fodor is. And as we panned back across the track, Fodor's just on the main straight. So mission achieved for Sarwas, overtaking in the pits. Fodor down into 2nd. And that's the way it stayed all the way to the end of the race. So Sarwas on his debut for Tier 7 in Season 6 takes home a victory with some clever, canny driving. Fodor came in to finish in 2nd place, and Matt Cooley came in 3rd. So the Drivers' Championship coming out of round 2 looks like this. Matt Cooley for McVitie's Hobnobs is at the top of the championship with 154 points, but right on his tail is Paul Hinsley of Big Boatley with 150 points. Fodor, with that good result there in Suzuka, is in 3rd place. Wilfred Gilles is in 4th. Jason Dyer of Ryan Reynolds Racing is in 5th place. Jason Dyer of Ryan Reynolds Racing slipped down into 5th place, dropping down from the top of the table. He wasn't able to partake in Suzuka, so it was a big loser there. Sarwas on his debut jumped straight into 6th place. Jamie Ellis slips down into 7th. Ex-FSR Torpedo enters the top 10 in 8th. Harlan Hatter dropped down 1 place to 9th, and John Becker of FTW Racing or RacingSimTools.com also moved into the top 10 for the first time. Looking at the team's championship, Big Boatley head up the top of the table with 186 points, followed closely by McVitie's Hobnobs. Looking in 3rd place, it's Robert Fodor in Small Sons Audi goes burr burr. However, it's been announced that any teams with only 1 driver are going to be eliminated, so a number of teams are going to disappear off his table before the end of this race. In 4th place, it's FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com. In 5th, it's the 488 team. In 6th is another solo driver in Ryan Reynolds Racing. 7th is Mercs and Recreation. 8th is BeesWax Racing. 9th is Phoenix Racing. And TWG Racing are in 10th. And rounding out the field is Ryan Gosling Racing. As you can see in the background image there, as we wait for the race to get underway, Hungaroring, not like previous 2 rounds. It's cloudy, it's overcast, and it is raining. The very wet track going to be a real challenge. Our drivers are going to be very, very cautious going into this round. Same conditions for qualifying. And bringing it in on pole position, returning after taking a break for Suzuka, it's Jason Dyer on pole with a 151.057. Alongside him, on the front row, it's Ben Hitchcock of the 488 team. On row 2, Tyver Kangset, there again is Honda NXS, and right alongside him is the other Honda NSX of Hendrik Sauwas. These two have not elected to form a team, but if they did, it would clearly be quite dominant based on their results so far. On row 3 in P5 is Robert Fodor alongside Marcin Olejars. On row 4 is Jordan Watson alongside Dami Ayo of TWG Racing. Row 5, P9 is Matt Cooley of McVitie's Hobnobs alongside Wilfred Gilles. Row 6 is Luca Ziga, the other 488 team driver, alongside Daniel Smith of FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com. Row 7 is John Becker, also of FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com, so they're well up the field together. Alongside John, it's Tripp of McVitie's Hobnobs. Row 8 is Paul Hinsley of Big Boatley, the first Big Boatley car, quite a way down the field. P16 is Matt O'Brien. Row 9 in P17 is Carol Piquera, alongside Lord Nem of Phoenix Racing. Row 10, it's the first of the BeesWax Racing cars in Nils Nyns alongside Kirill Brzezowski. Row 11, Sindri Ragnarsson of TWG Racing alongside Jamie Ellis. Row 12, it's ex-FSR Torpedo alongside Hakan Schott. Row 13, it's Gav Diesel alongside Andrei Kuchar of Merckx and Recreation. Row 14, Steve Bezic, the second BeesWax Racing entry alongside Uros Huzjak. Row 15 in P29 is Domagoj Tonticek alongside Steph Farrell. Row 16 is Radomir Kajerski of Phoenix Racing alongside Adam Bowers. On row 17 in P33 it's the Tier 7 Championship for Season 4. Conor McCarthy seems to be struggling a bit of this track in his Audi R8 alongside the Master of Dirt in another Audi R8. And in the final row in P35 it's Daniel Oppenhuisen alongside Nick Kononov. And we join them just as they line up for the start, and Dyer well clear of the front of the field there. I don't know if Hitchcock has perhaps slipped too far back from his start position, but he seemed right alongside Hangset, which will make life even more difficult for him at the start of the race. And the field comes down into T1. A little movement around, somebody off the track to the right there, but recovers straight away. But other than that, no issues, everybody around safely. As they approach turn 3, you can see the spray flying up. Going to be very difficult until some of this water's cleared off the track for the drivers. Still very close together, but that's Uros Huzjak who's took to the grass. Big mistake. Sweeps right into the middle of the pack, sends cars scattering everywhere. And the pack split to try and get around the incident, but they're 4, nearly 5 wide, and it can only end in one way. Big smash. Most cars are still pointing in the same direction, but it's not a great way to start the race. That incident really seemed to be instigated by Uros taking to the grass quite quickly, sliding into the rest of the pack. But the main field pulls away around the fast left-hander of turn 4. And they sweep round turn 4 into the quite difficult turn 5. Got to be very patient in turn 5 as you approach the chicane. Drivers through the chicane, single file through this part of the track, unless you're very, very brave to try and overtake. Very much be relying on the drivers around you to give you space. And everybody through the chicane cleanly. Halfway around the first lap, only one big incident so far. But that resulted in a bit of a gap, giving the drivers some work to do. Into the sweeping set of corners that forms turns 8 through to 11. And they sweep round corner 9. Still in this complex of corners. No real way through in this section unless somebody makes a mistake. And that doesn't seem to be happening too much on this opening lap. Sweep through T11. It's a short straight and downhill towards the tight T12. Nearly towards the end of the lap now. And it is T12. Driver's trying to get right on that apex, on that curbing. Have to be careful though, curbings will be slippy in this wet weather. And the last thing you need on the first lap is to end up backwards just by catching too much curb. It's around the hairpin bend of 13. Corner which looks bigger from the outside than it does from the inside. Doesn't feel this big when you're actually in the car driving through. And they passed the pit stop entrance there on the right and around the final corner, T14, and finished the first lap. So only one big incident has broke the field up a little bit, but the drivers have got an hour to recover, get back in the mix. And Dyer leads out at the end of the first lap with Hitchcock in second, Kangsep in third. No drive-through penalties this week, so everybody was quite well behaved at Suzuka. Excellent performance by all the drivers in Artia to end up with no big incidents that required intervention by the stewards. Starting in first place, Hitchcock probably keen to try and get up there and make an impression. Tries a big dive into T1. Lucky that Dyer saw him there and didn't drive into him. Hitchcock well overcooked that, right off into the runoff area, and Kangsep's seen a chance. They're alongside for T3. Well, Hitchcock is brave, keeps it on the inside of the curve, and retains second place following that mistake into T1. Kangsep a little bit wide, but not a big problem on that corner. That gives Dyer a little bit of breathing space, chance to try and move away from Hitchcock. Pick up the BeesWax Racing coming up on Master of Dirt. Both these cars caught up in that incident on the opening corners. Coming up towards the chicane. And it was noticeable that as will become clear in this race, the Audi really did not seem to like this wet weather. Master of Dirt just drifting there towards the wrong part of the track, which causes him to take the wrong line for the next corner. That was all the opening that the Aston Martin required. BeesWax Racing through on Master of Dirt following that slight mistake. And then just up ahead, it's Robert Fodor, also in an Audi, drifting wide again, opening the door for the Audi of John Watson behind him. But then Fodor really seems to slide there on T12, ends up off the track, and that lets the pair of them through. That's Watson and Cooley attacking Fodor. He's got Aljaz also lining up behind him. Yep, the Bentley's through. Aljaz looks to be sizing up, and Dami Ayo is also lining up there. So Fodor just falling back through the field, struggling for grip. You can see the car sliding. Looks just a matter of time before Aljaz gets through. See how the Audi behaves into T1. Oh, look at Cooley there, sliding wide in the Bentley. So that means Fodor comes back at him. Fodor does recover a place, but does appear to be struggling at this stage of the race for grip into the T3, where all the action happened on the opening lap. Oh, and goes wide again, gets strange grip, goes very, very wide, just hangs onto the car. And that means Cooley's through. Aljaz is going to be through as well. Dami Ayo's in the background, sizing up. Fodor looked nervous then going into that corner. You can see how much ground Dami Ayo ate up. Fodor definitely struggling with the Audi's grip at this stage of the race through the chicane. And every time it comes to a braking zone, the Ferrari of Ayo is just leaping forward behind the Audi. And we pick up Jordan Watson. Another Audi, and just pirouettes round on T13. And has to wait while most of the field go past him. This again is on the opening lap. Watson losing dozens of places here while he's stuck at the side of the track. Eventually gets going again, and that looked to be the Mercedes of possibly Oppenhausen. So it could be down in 25th, 26th place from that one spin. Pick up with Sarwas. And Sarwas, the car just slides again. He ends up pointing the wrong way down the track. Looked like one of the Bentleys there. That would have been Cooley, I think. Sarwas turns around, starts to rejoin the track. Look like the beeswax there of Nils Nyns going through. The two Nissans of Ellis and O'Brien. That means that Sarwas has dropped right down into P19 at least. There's the Lexus there of XFSR Torpedo. Lots of drivers having spins and losing places. We're back with BeesWax Racing again, closing in this time on McCarthy in the Audi. You saw the way the Audi went to the wrong part of the track. Again, struggling with grip in the wet conditions. Totally in the wrong place now to defend. And the BeesWax Racing goes through on McCarthy. Takes that place, moves up to 26. Not bad, I think it ended up at basically the back of the field after the incident on lap 1. A little touch then between the Mercedes and the Aston Martin, and it resulted in them both spinning out. Number 42 is Oppenhausen, it's Kozierski just ahead of him. And they both try and get going. Number of cars going through. Saw a Lexus that looked like it might have been, well, it could have been from where they are, it's like to have been shot. So these guys will have dropped down into beyond 30th place. And we pick up with Sarwas again, trying to move up the field. He's trying to attack Matt O'Brien in the Nissan GTR. GTRs having not elected to form a team. Sarwas made that one look pretty easy. Got a lot of pace and he's out of position. And we're only 5 laps in, but there's been a hell of a lot happening in this race. Cut to John Becker coming up to T1. He's being attacked by Hinsley in the Bentley number 86. So Big Boatley going through there, but in the background it's Tripp who's just slid off, one of the Mivitis, and that is Torpedo coming through, just like a torpedo right into the side of the Bentley. I think Torpedo just outbraked himself and couldn't stop the car. Massively ambitious there for T1. So big coming together. Pick up Robert Fodor, again, who's been struggling in the Audi, who just slides out on T5, ends up with the car pointing onto the grass, and then has the misery of watching everybody going past. And struggles on the grass to get any grip to try and get back onto the track. And that's the second BeesWax Racing car going through there. And at this stage, the 833 car was in 22nd place, so almost in 30th place now for Fodor. Still quite early on in the race, only into lap 6 with Marcin Olejaz coming round, and the rear end just slides away on him, pirouettes round, and the Ferrari of Dami Ayo manages to avoid him, gets through, and again, driver pointing the wrong way, watching the whole, very close rejoin there, but he's back on safely, but a lot of the field has gone past him. Now we're with Sindri Ragnarsson of TWG Racing, who's drifted wide, opened the door for Jamie Ellis in the Nissan GTR. Makes that look an easy pass. The Ferrari just sliding away. Sindri really struggling for grip there. We're only just into lap 8. Just coming through his shot now is Nyns, and there was some suspicion about his Aston Martin potentially having some secret spy devices like oil slicks, but right behind him, Lord Nem and Olejaz both spin off together. So does Nyns really have that special device in his car to make other cars fall off the track? Who knows? Well, that's Lord Nem and Olejaz having a second spin there, dropping even further down the field. Just into lap 11, and we're with Paul Hinsley, a Big Boatley, trying to keep up with Bagil, but the back end of the car just slides out and in on that corner, and he's stranded right in the middle of the corner, unable to move, and gets the classic problem of being nose into a barrier in a really dangerous place, and he's stuck there while nearly the entire field goes past him. Hinsley started this in 8th place, but he's going right down to the back of the field while he waits for a gap in traffic to be able to rejoin the track. Desperately tries to get going. I mean, that was McCarthy. McCarthy currently in 23rd, so way down the field now for Paul Hinsley. Lost a huge number of places. It's showing 21st, but I think it's a lot further down than that. And from 2nd place, it's Ben Hitchcock finally pitting on 11. That's quite early doors, so I don't know if Ben's picked up some damage or he's got tactics. That puts Ivor Kangset up into 2nd place. Lap 13 coming into final corner. It's Daniel Smith being attacked by Piquera. And that looked a bit naughty there. Caught the rear quarter of the Lexus and just pirouetted it round and then drove through and away. Very naughty indeed. I think that one might be sent up to the stewards and Dan Smith losing about 3 or 4 places there while he's stranded. Got going again, but he's dropped right down the field. He was in 7th place, he's now in 11th, and he's got the Nissan GTR there, and Matt O'Brien coming at him, and I think that's going to go through as well. So big loser there was Dan Smith, but just a few corners later, as Alonso would say, maybe a bit of karma. Kara loses the rear end on turn 5, slides into the grass, and loses 3 places while he recovers. We pick up Matt Cooley pitting from 3rd place. This will release Dami Ayo into 4th. But the pit stop strategies will all have to pan out. Dami Ayo moving into 3rd position now. Having a good drive this week. And Dyer, the race leader, electing to pit on lap 14. Diving into the pits at the very last minute. Just as Dyer's coming in, Master of Dirt was ahead of him, did a bit of a David Coulthard, the most embarrassing thing in the world. He won't like looking at this one again, I'm sure. Does a spin in the pit lane, and he's trapped there while the leaders come through. Dyer's on the approach to the pit lane limit. He slows down really early, and look at how much time Kangset makes up on the pit entry. Dyer definitely needs to work on his pit entry routines, because also the first one away at the end of the pit stop is Kangset, so that's an easy position made up from Kangset just from a mistake with Dyer going into the pits, slowing down way too early for the pit lane limiter. A few laps later, Dami Ayo pits from the lead. Breaks nicely in time for the pit lane limiter. The risks of getting a 30-second stop go mean that it is not worth the risk of trying to carry too much speed across the pit lane limiter line. We rejoin Dami Ayo after his pit stop, and he's got major issues straight off the track there. Car's going through, and it turned out, he revealed after the race, he'd done a schoolboy error, and in the pits he'd fitted dry tyres. It gave him no grip whatsoever, so he was going tumbling down the field, and even worse, he's going to have to do another pit stop to change those tyres and possibly elect to repair that damage. But look at Sarwas. At the start of the last sector, Sarwas was 6.5 seconds plus behind Dami Ayo, and now he's right behind him. So Dami Ayo losing a mountain of time to everybody else in the field from making a mistake in the pits with the tyres. You'd think he'd learn. That's a mistake that we make together when we're doing the endurance racing. I'm sure it is a mistake he will not make twice, depending on the weather conditions. Dami Ayo into the pits for a second time then to put the right tyres on, but that really effectively eliminates him out of the battle for the podium for this race. And for those unfamiliar with his modus operandi, Nils Nyns has yet again taken the opportunity to go long for his pit stop and take the opportunity to do a bit of showboating in first place in a desperate attempt to get into the highlights video. I don't know why we indulge this sort of behaviour, but here he is in first place. Don't be fooled, everybody, he's still got to go into the pits, but he'll do anything for a moment of glory in the highlights video. BeesWax Racing over the line after 19 laps in first place. Meanwhile, Robert Fodor is attacking the other BeesWax Racing car as they come towards the end of lap 20. Fodor out of position, having qualified very quickly. And coming into the last corner. Makes a big dive. Look at the speed there on the Audi as it makes a big dive up the inside. Luckily, the BeesWax car is aware of him being there, doesn't shut the door. And Fodor goes through to move up to 16th place. I'm sure that won't make Fodor very happy. Lost a lot of places at the start of the race. We catch Adam Bowers attacking Lord Nem into T1. Lord Nem goes very wide there, and see Bowers on the slightly drier line. Much easier traction for him, so he gets through. So he must have slipped back again. Further around the same lap. This time he catches the curb Bowers behind Lord Nem, and that takes him straight into the runoff area. Very wide indeed. So he'll lose a number of places because of that. And I think Hakan Scott moves through, takes that position away. Pick up Andrej Kuča, goes very, very wide on turn 5, does a full 360 and then tries to recover. He's losing lots and lots of places. That looked like one of the Hobnobs etc. cars. And at last, it's time in Tier 7. It's taken 3 rounds to get there, but it is time for us to enter the Spinsy zone. We're with Nyns, clearly thinking he's got it made in first place, forgetting he's still got a pit stop to go. Decides that tarmac is for losers and the only way to really win a race is to do it on the grass. Also sees a bit of barrier that he thinks needs knocking back into shape, and he thinks he'll help the owners of the course by doing that. So gives it a little tap, sorts it out, gets back onto the track. And well done, Nyns. It's taken you quite a while this season to get your Spinsy in, but we're glad we're there. Pits very shortly after that. We're right near the end of the race now. There's only a couple of laps to go. We're into the pits for Nyns. That'll take him out of first place, and that clears the way for Ben Hitchcock, who managed to work his way up to the front of the field. So Ben Hitchcock for 488 Racing takes his first victory of the Season 6 Championship for Tier 7. And coming in second place with another strong drive, it's Ivar Kangset in the Honda NSX. I'll be pleased with that result. He's had one bad race so far this season, Ivar, but he's in a good, strong position for the Drivers' Championship. And in third place is Jason Dyer, who's got to look at what he did in that pit stop. He definitely lost a place on the pit stop entry procedure, where he slowed down way too early, and Kangset overtook him in the pits. And we saw Cooley there going across the line in 4th. Eventually, though, for the BeesWax Racing, Nils Nyns finished down in 13th position, following his bit of showboating at the front of a race and a little trip into the barriers just to knock him back into shape. Things were a little bit more exciting for the 833 car driven by Steve Bezic for BeesWax Racing. Pursued by Lord Nem on the last lap, the damage incurred to the BeesWax car in that incident on turn 3 on the first lap meant that it was really destroying its front tyres. So it had no grip towards the end and was losing time hand over fist to Lord Nem coming up from behind. So last time out in Season 5, Lord Nem did steal a position back almost on the finish line at Laguna Seca from another driver. So we're required to keep our eye on the ball all the way around the final lap, try and keep that Aston Martin behind. And looks like just enough was done coming into the final corner. The finish line, thankfully, is very shortly after the final corner. So the eventual positions there is BeesWax Racing, Steve Bezic in 16th and Lord Nem in 17th. So let's have a look at the official results from round 3 of Season 6 of the GT3 Championship. Ben Hitchcock finishes in first place for the 488 team, followed closely by Ivar Kangset, with Jason Dyer down in 3rd. It was Matt Cooley from McVitie's Hobnobs who crossed the line in 4th place. John Becker came in 5th for FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com. And the second 488 team entry of Luca Ziga was in 6th. Karol Piquera finished in 7th. Wilfred Bagil in 8th. Sindri Ragnarsson of TWG Racing was in 9th. Jamie Ellis was in 10th. Dan Smith, the other FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com entry, was in 12th. Nils Nyns, as we saw for BeesWax Racing, was 13th, with Steve Bezic for BeesWax in 16th. Lord Nem of Phoenix Racing was in 17th position. After all these incidents, Robert Fodor finished in 15th place. In the second half of the field across the line, 19th position from Tripp for McVitie's Hobnobs team. Andrej Kuča was in 20th for Mercs and Recreation. Paul Hinsley, who was doing very well at one point until he had a bad spin and got trapped against the barriers for Big Boatley, finished in 21st. Dami Ayo, after the disaster of putting on the wrong tyres for TWG Racing, finished in 24th. And the second Phoenix Racing entry of Radomir Kazierski was in 34th. So looking at the Drivers' Championship coming out of round 3, Matt Cooley remains at the top of the table for McVitie's Hobnobs. Jason Dyer is in second place, having missed a round, moves up 3 places, now he's back. But could have been a little bit better. going to have to work on that pit stop entry procedure for certain. Paul Hinsley, a big Boatley, had quite a difficult race this time round. Slips back 1 place into 3rd. Wilfred Bugil stays in 4th. Robert Fodor slips back into 5th. John Becker of FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com, moves up 4 places. Ivor Kangset moves up 6 places. Another good result after a disappointing Suzuka brings him up to 7th. Jamie Ellis, pretty consistent results for Jamie. He slips back just 1 place to 8th. And Ben Hitchcock of the 488 team moves up, leaps up the table with that victory and moves into the 9th position on the championship. Hendrik Sarwas had a bit of a disappointing race after a couple of spins and ends up in 10th place on the Drivers' Championship. Looking at the Teams' Championship, those teams with a single driver have now been eliminated, as described at the start of the show, but with Hitchcock's victory, that means the 488 team shoot right up the table into 1st place, displacing Hobnobs, etc., who push down into 2nd. FTW Racing, RacingSimTools.com are in a solid 3rd place. Big Boatley are in 4th. BeesWax Racing, with pretty decent results this week, move into 5th place. Mercs and Recreation, well, they struggled a bit more in the wet conditions. They're in 6th. TWG Racing are in 7th. Damn it, I will be ruining the mistake with the tyres and the pit stop. And Phoenix Racing round out the table in 8th position. Well, that rounds out all the action from the Hungaroring for round 3 of season 6 for Tier 7. Next time out, it's Mount Panorama. It's an endurance race for Mount Panorama, so it's a 90-minute race, which will include both refueling and changing of tyres for the pit stops. The mountain takes no prisoners. It usually ends up with a lot of cars carrying damage, because the smallest mistake means you're straight into the wall. So it'll give you a really difficult race next week round. Please join us, either for the live stream or for the highlight show. And as ever, if you've enjoyed this, please leave a like or a comment and subscribe to catch future editions. Thanks for watching. Cheerio.